Good evening, and welcome to Waterhouse Vibes. Another Sunday, another day in the journey of the Jamaican people. Today, we're going to talk about corruption in Jamaica. As you are aware, the Prime Minister and his gang seems to be determined to avoid the prison. As such, he and his gang have nominate one of the member of the gang to be in charge of the investigation into the prime minister finance. This is a serious issue and it raises question in our head, in the minds of the Jamaican people, as to whether or not this wholeness-led JLP government take the Jamaican people for fool, for idiot. They have done some things, and sometimes some of us laugh at it. But now we see the PMP, the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister showing his hands and what he's about, and that is to avoid prison. With me, with me to discuss this is Brother John Horton, Herb Nelson, Patrick McCarthy, Les Crawford, and special guest Mike Nelson, a CPA from out of what Washington D.C. CPA who operate between Washington D.C. and New Jersey. I am Mike Anita, your host, and we're going to at some point be reacting to your questions. I should say that if you have question, can you put it in the chat so that the panelists can react and discuss your suggestion or your question? Herb, you want to do the introduction of Mike for tell the people a little bit about Mike because you guys are close, or John?
Or
Yeah,
Mike can introduce himself.
Or Mike can introduce himself.
yeah.
That's
I'll
pretty
just
good.
let Mike go ahead and introduce himself. All right.
Well, Michael, good evening, and thank you for the privilege of speaking with your audience and share the panel with you, fine gentlemen, as I've done in the past. Uh, I've been a CPA for 43 years. I have served in many capacities during my tenure as a CPA. I continue to be in good standing with my license, which means that there are no complaints or any negatives against my license. I have done audits. I have done my fair share of financial reporting, be it government or private industry, and I've served with distinction at the New York State Society of CPAs, the largest and oldest body of CPAs in the country. And I am also licensed by the American Institute of CPAs, which is charged with the role of governing people in my job. So I am just a little bit reluctant because I don't like to appear to blow my own horn. But I see my role as a CPA as enhancing the confidence of my clients, several hundred of which I serve, and helping them to understand where they can do better and how my advice can make them better. Accordingly, as I come to this topic this evening, I am honestly troubled, very troubled by the choice of Mr. Chung to head the FID. As you know, I spoke regarding the Prime Minister's conduct as it was subject to the Integrity Commission. To my knowledge, the Prime Minister has not, in any way, shape, or form, resolved those problems or questions. Instead, what I've seen is a two step or a shuffle of the shuffling of the feet, rather, to avoid any accountability, and things have remained quiet after this latest bombshell appointing Mr. Chung to head the FID. That is in of itself shocking because in my role as a CPA, I have supported financially and otherwise many Jamaican organizations here in the United States. And I must say, and it might be indicative of my bias as a Jamaican, that the quality that stands out in these organizations is a thoroughness and integrity with which my fellow Jamaicans have embraced whatever challenges and roles they've been asked to play. Invariably, it has been found that my fellow Jamaicans have always taken the high road in terms of their stewardship and the excellence that they bring different roles they've played. And I say that to compare the role of Mr. Chung. Mr. Chung is being appointed or recommended for appointment ahead of the FID is tantamount, in my opinion, to going to the fish shop, buying fish, and tolerating the odor from the rotting fish in the fish shop.
Sorry, I'm not hearing you so clearly, Mikey. I'm not sure. I have a thunderstorm here. So,
Yeah, I hear the background, John.
yeah. So I don't know if you could just say what you said again. I didn't hear all your words clearly.
Yeah. So what I was saying, John, is that I have served here in my 43 years as a CPA in different roles. Some in compliance and in general issuing financial statements and working within the various CPA organizations. My most prominent roles have been within the New York State Society of CPAs. I've also served in the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and I'm also a member of the American Institute of CPAs. So what I was saying is that one of the primary things I've noted in my different roles during my 43 years has been the excellence that many Jamaicans have brought to different roles that they have served in this country. And the common thread has been their excellence and their diligence and their commitment to high standards filled with integrity. Having recognized that, and I say I also might be very biased being Jamaican of Jamaican birth, is that the appointment of Mr. Chung to head the FID, in my mind, is tantamount to going to a fish shop, which invariably smells to the heavens, and trying to find the non-rotted fish to buy. In the case of Mr. Chung, my familiarity with his tenure at the JFF, which necessitated my writing to the Ministry of Culture and Sports, Babsy Grange, to ask her about his stewardship as it directly affected the reggae girls, when Mr. Chung attempted to collect quote unquote taxes for the Australian government from the World Cup for the reggae girls. And my point to that was, and I pointed to Minister Grange, was that it is highly unusual for a governmental authority to ask a non-governmental authority, i.e. the JFF, to collect taxes from the reggae girls. Not only was it highly unusual, but my reading of the situation regarding the World Cup with the reggae girls was that there were no taxes being collected from any of the non-Australian players. And therefore, Mr. Chung, presuming to have that authority, smelled like the rotted fish I compared his appointment to. And I also say that because of the relationship between the FID and the Integrity Commission, it is even more troubling because the Prime Minister has not yet resolved the issues that were raised by the Integrity Commission in its 172-page report outlining possible malfeasance, or at a minimum, the dubious nature of the funds that the Prime Minister had acquired in these various organizations. To accentuate my point further, Mr. Chung was quoted as saying that he did not understand why it was important for us to look at the monies transferred among the companies owned and controlled by the Prime Minister. That statement in of itself, in my mind, based on the exposure I've had in the financial world for the last 43 years, disqualifies Mr. Chung from holding an eminent position as head of the FID. And therefore, it leads to us questioning the objective of the Prime Minister in appointing him as head of the FID, especially since the Prime Minister has a duty of loyalty to tell the Jamaican people that his stewardship is not tainted by fraud and corruption. And appointing Mr. Chung to that role would imply that the Prime Minister is trying to obfuscate or in some way dissipate his obligation and possible liability with regards to his failure to disclose the source of funds that he used to acquire the many properties that are the subject of the Integrity Commission's investigation. So if you put a man like Dennis Chung in charge of the FID, I do not see any kind of benefit and or for the Jamaican people. And I also question why the Prime Minister and the other minister in charge, Minister Dixon, if I'm not mistaken, why would they would seek to appoint a man with dubious qualities such as Dennis Chung to such a sensitive role that should seek rather to enhance the integrity and the confidence of the outside world in the Jamaican accountability system, especially financial accountability. That financial accountability, in my opinion, is also further highlighted by the funds that were stolen in the SSL fraud matter. And so here we are again in a position to wonder exactly what is going on in that island that we love. I think the government has a duty to explain to the public why this appointment was made. Last but not least, I strongly believe in the power of a free press. I think the press is at the table to inform, be it in America or anywhere else, to inform the public at large as to the goings on in any situation. Other than a protest by the opposition party in Jamaica, I do not see the press coming forth to show that they have done the due diligence with respect to Mr. Chung. And accordingly, I see the press as failing the Jamaican people once again. So I will stop at that point so we can open for discussion.
Gentlemen, you have heard Mr. Brother Mike presentation. What's your reaction to what you just heard?
First, I need some clarification from you, Mike, in terms of the situation with the Reggae Girls and Dennis Chung. What was the outcome and what was the reasoning behind that collection, trying to collect that taxes, those taxes on behalf of the, what was the outcome of that?
Well, the outcome last was that I wrote to Babs Grange's office and I explained to them my knowledge of the situation, what I knew, and I knew people in the process. I knew that the Mali girls were involved in raising $3 million plus to help with the training for them to get to the tournament, the World Cup. And after I raised that with the Minister of Culture and Gender and Sports and pointed out what I knew, her response was that she gave $4 million to Dennis Chung to help the reggae girls. I said, hold up. Is that 4 million in addition to the 3 million plus raised by the Mali women? Or are you referring to the takeover for the Mali women did? The response was, we don't control the JFF. So there was no response to my question. However, shortly thereafter, I said within a month or so, the funds were released to the reggae girls without any taxes being withheld. And that's the way it should have been, because Dennis Chung does not represent any governmental entity. And by Dennis Chung presuming to present himself as a collector of taxes for the Australian government smelled in every way of fraudulent conduct, in my opinion.
Most definitely.
Herb, John, Patrick.
Yeah, I would just, I could add a couple of points that in my own research, right? And I just want to confirm. First of all, Dennis Chung, well, let me say this. The feedback I've gotten on the issue suggests two attempts to undermine the argument of his appointment. One is to say that the agency or the body that's appointing him is the Services Commission. It's not a
Public Service Commission.
Right, the Services Commission is appointing him. Number two, they posted an ad for the position late last year, and that in that ad it indicated certain criteria for appointment that Dennis Chung did not meet. Mainly 12 years experience in investigative work. In fact, someone who is more in the police force or in the military or in the intelligence unit would be more qualified based on that, what that condition was. Dennis Chung has none of that in his experience. The second argument, well, just to say that I don't know whether anybody applied or not. The point is, when they put out the ad a second time, which is more recent, they removed that requirement. And Dennis Chung applied. The second point is that initially, when the situation was announced by the Integrity Commission, Dennis Chung made reference to it, claiming that the Prime Minister was, I forget the term that you accountants use, but the effect of it was to suggest that there was nothing to indicate that the Prime Minister was falling short of the law. It's like he made a declaration in regard to the matter. So one of the biggest issues is that this declaration implied certain things which, now that he's being appointed, would be a conflict of interest as the chief investigative officer of this agency that he's applying for. So I don't know if you can comment. I couldn't find an actual text of his statement previously, but I did find quotes which for all intents and purposes was to remove any blame. The other thing that I saw was lots of photographs of himself and the prime minister's bodies. It's fairly well known in the media that there are bodies and photographs to prove it. But that's not, to me, that's not substantive. What I think is more substantive is the comments he made initially when the issue came up first, before the post for the FID was advertised. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Mike.
What I would say, John, what I would say is really this. That comment, I saw it in quotes in the newspaper, by the way. I was reading the Observer online and I saw it in the Observer. And when I saw that comment underscored why he is not eligible to hold the post that he holds. Because when he declared that he didn't see why the prime minister was culpable, it showed not just bias, but perhaps it was an overture to the prime minister, just like we have the same situation in this country where people showing loyalty to Trump are rewarded accordingly. But his statement, in the context of the role that he is looking to perform in, shows complete, not impartial, but complete ineligibility to be even considered in the role, because his technical knowledge is clearly limited. Clearly limited. And if it's clearly limited, how then can you expect any degree of objectivity in his role? He doesn't know that of which he speaks. It's an old saying, he's in over his head. Because justice must not just appear to be done, must not be said to be done, but there must be appearance of justice being done. And accordingly, in my opinion, him saying that demonstrates his ignorance of what the post really requires. And again, I am appalled that they would proffer this appointment, because I'm not unique as a Jamaican in having integrity. Jamaicans have always been known to shine brighter than the morning sunshine. And we embrace rules and we seek zealously to perform higher than we're expected to perform. And we bring integrity and commitment to these rules. So, coming from that culture in which I was born and raised, how then do you justify disappointment?
I can tell you how, brother. And I think we need to just go straight up and call for what it is. This Prime Minister Holiness, is doing everything to avoid going to prison. The appointment of Dennis Chung by the Service Commission is just part of that grand design. That is what is motivating this sort of behavior. The Prime Minister is trying to avoid going to prison. That is what he's trying to do. And he figured that, well, here is someone who might play along. But come back to this, what I said earlier. It's like Ray Charles Ray Charles can see this for what it is. It's a blind attempt to undermine certain institutions in the country and protect the prime minister from meeting his judgment day. That's my view. Patrick, Herb, what do you take?
Let me
This
let me eh, interject something, that another angle that we need to really consider.
Hey, Wendy?
You guys can hear me clearly?
Yeah,
Wendy?
yeah, Herb.
Yeah, man, you're
Yeah.
the clearest voice.
Wendy?
The United
You have
Nations
me out
has
a second.
supported sports for
Come a
community
second.
development for many years. The UN recognizes the power of sports in promoting peace, social inclusion, and gender equality. The UN has been working with various organizations to promote sports as a tool for development and peace. And one of the key organizations that it has worked with is FIFA. FIFA is represented in Jamaica by the Jamaica Football Federation. Now, Dennis has been around the Jamaica Football Federation for well over 15 years. He was there when Captain Burrell was there. Captain Burrell, who I grew up with, and who was corrupt as they come. He was there with the other secretaries, general secretaries, who abused their positions, because what has been happening, instead of recognizing the objectives of FIFA and the UN, the JFF has consistently been corrupt, has consistently come up short on its duties and responsibilities to football in Jamaica and to the various parish organizations like CASAFA, St. Anne, and others who, if you're not with them, then you're against them. And what we have seen, there is nothing in the GFF constitution that calls for them to have salaries for parish presidents and for members of staff, vice presidents, and others. And we have seen monies paid out to these people in the millions, right? We have seen them included on trips when the Jamaica team is going abroad. And we have seen them included in hotel accommodations. Now, if Dennis is in charge of the funds, and eventually he became a general secretary, how do you account for the misappropriations of so much money? I remember bringing this to the attention of the FIFA representative, who is a lawyer named Solomé in New York, because she would go down and inspect things, and we didn't see any results coming from that. And so we kept complaining. We, the Jamaica Diaspora Anti-Crime Task Force here in the US. And what happened? Eventually, FIFA sent down a chartered accountant from London. And that chartered accountant went in there and started to do his job, started to dig. And it became very uncomfortable for Dennis. Eventually, because of the fact Dennis gave the man such a hard time, he had to move his office out of the JFF office in New Kingston and move it up near the tax office in Constant Spring. If you guys know what Constant Spring is, near across from the Immaculate Conception High School. So What we're seeing here is the fact that Dennis, even as a chartered accountant, could not withstand the probing that chartered accountant that FIFA sent in, what he had to do. And the fact is, if you cannot run a financial organization, a simple committee, if you can't audit what's going on with the distribution of funds, if every time there's a World Cup or a CONCACAF, monies are coming up short, players can't be paid, coaches, doctors, other staffers can't be paid. They have to wait on the money, right? If that's you're taking, it's like kiting. Kiting is when you take one check and you move it between accounts, different banks, or what have you, to make the appearances that you have money, right? They were taking payments from FIFA and from CONCACAF and moving it to cover accounts that came up short. Now you have had, and he's not alive today to defend himself, but Captain Borrell had to pay off a divorce case, and he had to also run the Captain's Bakery, not just in Jamaica, but in other islands. This man became rich off of football in Jamaica.
But what Dennis Chung had to do with that?
Dennis Chung controlled the funds at JFF. And if indeed the captain was deliberately messing with the funds at JFF, it would have come under Dennis's portfolio. But there's no transparency. There was no transparency at the JFF. And with all of the missing payments, up until the time that Mike checked with Babsy, because Babsy wouldn't answer me, I asked for them to show a canceled draft or something where she had claimed she gave millions to Dennis Chung to support the women's team. And we knew at the time that Dennis had even asked Cedella Marley for funds based on the GoFundMe that the women had to start to fund their own trip to the World Cup in Australia. These women were sick and tired of being, abandoned at airports because JFF did not pay for the bags and baggage and equipment that had to move with them. On the men's team side, the men's team were stranded in Suriname. When Suriname had a return leg of I believe they were playing elimination for the World Cup, Jamaican team was asking them if they could accompany them on that plane to come back to Jamaica. You have players who have been stranded at the airport in Jamaica when Jamaica had been infected. And you had people that the president of the JFF, Ricketts, said he accommodated in Texas who were friends of his and supporters of his in other parishes. So you have this kind of general slackness that's occurring with misappropriation of funds. And Dennis has seen no evil, heard no evil, and spoken no evil in the minds of these people. So we have to figure out what was Dennis's role. It certainly didn't meet FIFA's guidelines of promoting football in communities for their development. So if you're not developing your community, what are you doing? This is a program we took to Jamaica in 2016 called Safer Cities. So later, 7 years later, they were able to begin the STAR program, which is a knockoff of the Safer Cities program, where you use football to promote teamwork and team development in communities. So schoolboys don't run around shooting each other because of the colors they wear, or the gangs they belong to, or the songs they sing. So we have a terrible situation with a man whose responsibilities were to the youth of Jamaica and the development of football in communities. And it never happened because they kept coming up short on funds. Now, we had asked for the FID to look into these fund shortage, and it has never occurred, never happened. So if the FID could not look at the JFF, and if Babsy didn't take it on herself to do an audit herself, or get competent people in there, why are we going to now employ him to run the FID itself? What can we expect? It makes no sense. You know, Dennis is a gatekeeper. He was a gatekeeper for Burrell. He was a gatekeeper for Ricketts, right? He didn't allow anybody from the outside to come in and discover anything. And he guarded his role zealously because Paul Cole, the auditor, and Sarah Solomé, the attorney from New York, could never get anything substantial to report to FIFA that would cause FIFA to suspend the JFF franchise, which is what would have happened.
But wasn't this reported to FIFA?
It was reported to FIFA, but for some reason, since, if you have to remember, it was Captain Burrell who turned state's evidence against Jack Warner in Trinidad. So that's the only thing that saved him from going to jail. But since then, Jamaica has been living on the edge. Jamaica's football program has not really been audited the way it ought to be, and action has not been fully taken to penalize them. I know that they started auditing the payments, but they knew there was a financial problem. And a financial problem just means the person who is responsible for the finances, Dennis Chung, was the problem because he's a chartered accountant. Nobody's supposed to be dictating to him how to misappropriate any funds, how to pay for people to fly or to be in JFF sponsored housing unless there were players or direct staff, doctor, therapists, physical therapists, or what have you. But all of these things were happening.
Let me ask you something, Herb. The things that you talk about, is there documentation
There's ample documentation.
huh?
There's letters that we sent to JFF, letters that we shared with Babsy and others.
And the we, who is the we?
Again, the task force was looking at why we could not get the cooperation of the JFF to do these community programs. The big we is like Kingston and St. Andrew Football Association, who they tried to suspend because they were calling them out for all these shortcomings. So was the president of the St. Anne Parish Football Association was calling them out. I mean, I can get into the trafficking, sex trafficking, and all these other things where our youth were getting hurt.
But here's
And
here's
and there was never anything said about that. Now, Dennis eventually became general secretary, and he never surfaced any of those things either. It was the vice president, Raymond Anderson, who I had an open discussion with, along with another football official here in the US, Michael Barnes. And we had this discussion as to how our kids were getting hurt, how they were being trafficked. You can't make this stuff up. I know you're going to take that person who have failed their kids in Jamaica, because the accomplishments of the JFF and the Jamaican teams have been fantastic. The monies in the millions that FIFA has given to them each time we show success should have started football like you see we propose the football across the entire country, where you see soccer moms and everybody else participating. Expand it into the schools, the primary schools, the high school, right? Have a huge outflow of support. And we even proposed that the FIFA Foundation, who you can apply to, I gave this program to the mayor of Montego Bay, today's mayor. I gave it to Baba Tunde, who would have started a program in Kingston as well as St. Thomas. You can ask the FIFA Foundation to build your stadiums. You can ask them to build your soccerplex. You can include buildings for various conferences, meetings, or what have you, because like Europe, like in Germany, every city, every town has a soccer team and a soccer stadium. And that's what FIFA Foundation says they will support. They will build you that stadium. They will build you the soccerplex. Soccerplex is like having 5 or 6 soccer fields along with the sports house, sports complex, where you can
Herb,
change, take showers, and do different things. Yeah.
okay. Let me bring Patrick into the conversation. Patrick, what's your take on this? Because
yeah,
it seems like the Jamaican government, Holness and them gang, take the Jamaican people for fool, because it's obvious. This is an attempt by him to avoid prison by appointing Dennis Chung. He's seriously trying to avoid prison, So, what's your take, Patrick?
well, I mean, you're so on point, Mike, because the fact of the matter is that when you see things happen in that blatant way, the way things have happened, and the information had finally come out about the whole financial situation with the Prime Minister, it's clear, right, that they would move heaven and high water for really ensure, right, that they come out on top. So one of the first things they would do is try to close ranks, right? And this is clearly what's happening. What Herb just outlined is something which is not even coming out for the first time. This is something we have discussed this before, right? So I mean, we are fully aware of that. Where we fall short, I think, is that we have not done due follow-up in terms of working across platforms with other organizations to really take action. Because what happens is that clearly you can't expect them to make changes based on appeals. the best way to do it is probably through the legal system. Show up the fraud in the legal system, if it means that. Because Mike outlined clearly, right, in his opening presentation, right, that accountability, right, is based on principle. There's no two way about it, right? It is one way. Accountability shows up the correct way in which an organization operates. The heart of any organization is its accountability, right? Which is why there are these checks and balances in place, as Mike can clearly articulate, in terms of auditing and documentation and so on, right? That back this up. So what we're talking about is that when they can come up with a character like Chung, to blatantly show that, despite his background, despite his terrible record, right? Not his what you call it? Not his accountant degree or accountant certification, but the fact that he can do what he does is because he has always been doing that and getting away with it. There's no follow-up to really bring him to accountability.
Accountability of who? The service commission or what?
No,
because it is a service commission.
The service.
I think, Mikey, and the whole question of the service commission or the public service commission who actually did the appointment. What we are seeing right now with the Andrew Holness government is that they're not heeding to no call from the PNP, no concern from the people in Jamaica.
They call it bad mind. That's what they call it, bad mind.
When it comes to corruption or whatever action the government or people in their party might do.
But
they don't care. Huh?
This is where last that it calls for bringing in some other branch of government, right, which would be the courts.
Definitely.
They expose everything that's going on.
What seems to be,
we have the documentation, we have a lot of things.
I definitely feel, Patrick, that this is one of the issues that the PNP or some mass body or civil society organization should take to the courts to get some kind of injunction, first of all, in the appointment and contest the thing in the courts, because the conflict of interest, first of all, with the things that Chung has already said to show is bias and is prejudgment of the Integrity Commission investigations around the Prime Minister and the SSL involvement of the Prime Minister. He has publicly cleared the Prime Minister from any wrongdoing in based on what he has said in relation to both SSL and the Integrity Commission investigations.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The other point, Les, I would add to that is that chartered accountants and CPAs, we do have a code of ethics by which we are allowed to practice.
Yeah.
I am actually shocked that the Jamaican Society of CPAs or Chartered Accountants, whatever they call themselves, has not held Mr. Chung accountable on any grounds at all. Because his comments, given the context, and obviously there's free speech, but then some of the other things he said and the failure of his tenure at JFF should have called into question his competence as a chartered accountant, if he is indeed a chartered accountant. And the fact that on ethical grounds he has not been held accountable is troubling, at the least. Very troubling.
But that's understandable, Mike. That's understandable because it's not likely that you'd see the Charters Association or whatever they're called, right? Come up and deal with it because there has been no action taken, right, against Chung. If there was action taken against Chung, that's likely when you'd see them, start their own investigation or start to show some concern. But to date, nothing like that has happened. As Herb clearly pointed out, that he has a track record of hiding in the bushes, right, and doing his dirty work.
The next thing I find happening is that a lot of things playing into this attitude of the government. If you notice, every day you see in the news, Holness taking reports from some police officer around the country, right? I don't know. To me, he's acting as if he is the commissioner of police, right? And it's part of the election campaigning strategy where they feel like because the murder rate in the country and the crime rate in the country is dropping, they feel they're getting enough support across the country to feel that they can disregard a lot of concerns that the People's National Party and other concerned Jamaicans raise as regards to corruption in the country. They feel they can get away with it at this time. So despite the outcry from certain sections of the country, despite the outcry from the People's National Party, I mean, they feel that the balance of forces in the country is on their side at this time. So they can get away with a Dennis Chung being at the FID, even though it smells, as you say, Mike. They know, right? Because people are talking out about it. But in the grand scheme of things, they feel they have enough support now so they can ride out the storm to the election. That is what I'm thinking.
It's what Jamaica people call bold and barefaced.
Barefaced, just
Right?
like that.
They couldn't care less.
They don't care less.
what your opinion is, mine, Patrick, Nita, or John. They don't care, right?
I think it's even worse than that, guys. You guys will recall the conversations that were held in the past regarding the competence of the DPP. That's the chief law enforcement officer in Jamaica.
Yes.
And the DPP has remained completely silent on the issues at the JFF, because of public integrity matter, the DPP should have been on top of that. She never touched it. So, but I also firmly believe that if the Jamaican middle class, because poor people in Jamaica just want money to put food on the table, they may or may not care about stuff, but the middle class and the upper class should accept full blame for this, only because they're in a position to make a difference. If they start to complain, if they start to act out and speak out, the government will take notice. Okay, because that's the vote you can't buy. And they have generally remained calm and silent, frankly.
Well, the PMP did a protest.
This week, yes, they did.
Yeah, and 300 people. But I am not really impressed with that, because I keep asking myself, how come the PMP did not know this appointment from early on? They wait until the close to time when he's going to assume office. They start making noise. Did they not know prior to this months? Because
leadership is something that we all can speak on at some level, but leadership of the PNP leaves so much to be desired. They seem to be a day late and a dollar short.
Well, you gentlemen should remember, when the matter of corruption came up with the ICE, what name? The Integrity Commission report.
Right.
We had the MP for Waterhouse on the program.
Right.
And we discussed the idea of going on the street. You remember the answer at that time? The answer at that time is that we don't have no proof that we can't go on the street because we don't have evidence. And we don't know. So clearly what has transpired since then is that the more the monkey climb, the more battle show. And the Prime Minister, people in Jamaica have shifted. The public mood has shifted, which is what now allow the PNP to say, all right, let's go on the street, because the man is doing what you just said. No response lead to further action to brandish what him can do, get away with what him can do.
Mr. John, the big thing to me, though, John, is this. You're right in what you just said. But you see, when you talk about leadership, if the opposition party hopes to lead Jamaica in the near future, these are issues that they should be embracing and getting into the news media to talk about. Now, I know the news media also has its favorites, and therefore you can go on certain stations, but you can go on others. But to the extent you can go on certain stations you have access to, your point people, your spokespeople, or whomever it is you designate to go out there, should be talking about it. So on the evening news, on the midday news, people should be talking about it. I watch CBM and I watch the other programs. Somebody should be able to speak on this to say, hey, here's the problem. And it doesn't have to be anything rabid or boisterous or vindictive. You simply, there's enough there to make the case to say, here's what we have going on, yada, yada, yada. But nobody says anything. And that's the problem.
Mike, stick a pin on that point that you're raising. What actually happened was that this demonstration that the other Mike raised is that instead of you having people with some knowledge and background of the thing talking to the media, what happened was that you had this demonstration, you had nobody with no real public profile or understanding of the issue surrounding the appointment of Dennis Chung. So what the media did was that they targeted a lot of the people in the demonstrations who had absolutely no knowledge of why they were on the street, right? And it made like a mockery.
Yes, it
It
would.
made a mockery of the situation, because what you are saying is that the people who have the talking points, the people who know, right, should be leading this thing and making those who don't know more aware. And that
Absolutely.
was not happening as you talk about the whole leadership issue,
Which
right?
is
So,
why I also pointed the finger at the Jamaican press. And why I pointed the finger at the Jamaican press last is simply because we still suffer from colonial flu. The message they're not willing to embrace or articulate any further, but they're willing to judge the messenger.
yeah.
And that's the problem. That's the problem. They're judging the messenger because the press also fails miserably in doing their duty. Why? Because there is enough here to present a balanced position without appearing to choose sides. The problems at the JFF, combined with the comments made by Mr. Chung regarding the IC report, if the press had a slither of understanding, they could easily turn it around and say, well, wait a minute, XYZ, but they have not done that. So what they do is they turn around and say, oh, your pants dirty and you protesting. And you shouldn't be protesting because you have a dirty pants. They don't validate the objective of the protest. They see to attack the protester because the pants dirty. Or pants might have a skin. And that is the serious deficiency of the Jamaican press. And I mean serious.
But
It's very sad. It's very sad.
We live in a real world, and the press is part of the system in Jamaica in much the same way that the press is part of the system here.
Very
so
true.
if you have a press that is basically not trying to stir up anything, carry the status quo. For example, just to make one point that last said about leadership, the PNP did have a press conference before the demonstration, and even at that press conference, the language was, we're going to do something, but we not tell the people what we're going to do which is a couple of days before the demonstration. So when they have the demonstration now and the microphone go to people, they don't have a full understanding because leadership not there. Exactly. Our leadership put the people on the street as robot and not actually in the demonstration. But the PNP held a press conference. Leadership called a press conference at the PNP HQ and had the press there, and the press asked question, and in that thing, when them say them not tolerate what was going on, they asked, what you going to do?
What did you use AI?
Eh?
What did you use AI?
Seems that way. Seems that way because
Patrick. Patrick, no I.
Remember, Marco, regardless though, the PMP put 300 people, 300 to 400 people on the street.
Right.
But my worry before that, in terms of disappointment.
Well, there needs to be an injunction, just like I said earlier. That's really what's needed now.
I don't know sure if that will go even anywhere because the man he assumed office on Monday gone. Monday of last week. That's when he assumed office.
But a court could
Yeah, but
The
stop
courts
it.
still,
could. This is where the blind lead in the blind.
yeah.
This is like a kangaroo court. Okay, there's no listen. The word justice and Jamaica are paradoxes, isn't it? Cause they don't coexist at all, and that's the problem. And I keep saying the leadership on the opposition side is lacking because it's not leadership is not measured by, in my opinion, leadership is not about how inflammatory you can be. Leadership is your ability to frame an issue so the majority of the people understand the issue.
Well, Golden is on the platform singing that when right time come, some more charge of corruption. That's how we must sing, you know. And who can disagree with that?
Listen, it might well turn out to be that way, Mike, but the thing that I find apart, look, maybe because we're all educated to a greater degree than most, that we can articulate the way we articulate. That's a real possibility. But you know, I've never found the ordinary person on the street lacking if you put an issue out there, they can frame it well and they get it. So my thing is, why is the opposition such a lame duck? Why is the opposition unable to frame the issue and command the stage? You know, I listen to the Prime Minister. I listen to a radio station in Jamaica called Cool 97 FM, which is actually under the office of the Prime Minister. And it does broadcasts featured by the Prime Minister and the members of government and even the opposition, especially budget time in the Parliament or whatever. And my argument is really simply this. As I listen to it, I hear the Prime Minister speaking about integrity and honesty and all this went down and that went down. And I'm saying to myself, hold on. This is truly boldface. Because his integrity is non-existent in my book, based on what I've read in the IC report. And here he is trying to criticize the other side. And maybe it's because I'm listening to one part of the media, but the other side does not seem to have a comeback position. So I find that there's no dialogue going on where the people can benefit. It's just the blind leading the blind. And as a thief don't like thief with long bag. So you question whether the opposition remain in silence so they can get a long bag too.
That's
Well,
right.
see, the irony of this whole thing is this. The common man in Jamaica don't understand what's going on, right? They've trained him for so long, Michael, to come out and use a loudspeaker and shout the loudest, right? Wave the flag. We're orange or we're green. And nobody really understands what's going on other than politicians themselves.
That was so evident in the demonstration, Herb. Because
Absolutely.
I saw some videos of the thing and it was embarrassing just to watch, to see first of all the attitude of the media people. You know, they were instead of as Mike said, trying to investigate the real issues behind the Chung appointment, they were there like an arm of the government trying to poke into the demonstration and pull out everything that was wrong. And they got it because the people were not aware of the substance of the issue. So they were saying, oh, the PNP pull out all these people, and it's like a laughing matter, 'cause not one person know why they were there. You understand?
Yep. Yep.
John, I have a question.
Yeah.
You're a long time organizer. What advice or suggestion would you make to the PNP just now?
New leader.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you this. It's not the PNP really, it's the advice to the people. And this is why, I bring back what is now aged suggestion to the group. People's manifesto. Because even though it can only reach us a limited number of people, the bottom line is exactly the point that, I wouldn't be embarrassed to hear, unlike last, I wouldn't be embarrassed to hear because what people say on the street, because they don't know. They're on the street like AI, meaning that they have been told to turn up, and when the camera come and the microphone go around, it's no different from here. Some of those rallies that take place in different parts of the country, when they ask people why you come and what you think about X, Y, or Z, they don't necessarily have a proper understanding, because education, political education, is not going on in Jamaica today to speak of. It's very narrow.
So what should the PNP be doing? What should they be doing? Political
Well,
education is one. What? Because election is coming.
yeah, well,
This this
Aaron,
this disappointment plays into the PNP hand. This
it's
is something they
supposed
can,
to play. It's supposed to play into the PNP hand,
but
but have
they're not
they
making use of it effectively.
exactly? Why is the PNP not doing a national broadcast?
Leadership, John. Leadership. It
Why
comes with
is the PNP?
leadership.
How much money to go on the radio with a broadcast? Not almost nothing. One of their money people would sponsor that.
John,
What is
leadership.
the PNP newspaper? Because they do have a newspaper. What is it saying? To educate the people about the issues. Why money for school, money to put fix road in the communities where you have the big giant pothole, because no Benz are driving in those areas necessarily. Why is it that money that the people need is not available? But the Prime Minister and the ministers of government have paid themselves handsomely for the work that they are doing. So I agree. Thief not, what you say again, Mike? Thief not like thief with long bag. That make one quiet and the other one looking on. Them just
Yeah,
a tippy toe. Them just a tippy toe.
absolutely. It's about leadership.
Unfortunately, that
But
is the
John,
state of affairs in Jamaica as a general rule. When we keep saying accountability, is really it can only accountability in a country like ours, well, in Jamaica, can only be had when the people begin to rise up and show that they are demanding accountability.
and that
Even my action like going to a court and getting a judge to block the appointment is something I never thought about, but it don't take no whole heap of money, and it will be a very key step. An attempt should be made to do it.
You know what I
If there's
find.
one,
You know
if
what's
there's
trying to.
one thing this thing proves is that, like here in the US, when you appoint somebody to an important government agency, you need to have a hearing. You need to have Here in New
The
York, you have a
system, right? The
cemetery.
system need to be different.
Yeah,
That's very true.
it comes up woefully short, right? Because look, this man has been dismissed from Kentucky Fried Chicken. He's been dismissed from JUTC, from the other National Works Agency, and so on and so forth. It shows that he's not living up to the standard required of a chartered accountant. And as I sit here, I recall in 2016 going down to Jamaica and briefing the Chamber of Commerce people, they call the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica. And who was there as the guy running the PSOJ was Dennis Chung. So when I introduced the program for FIFA program, he was right there, John, right? He knew what we wanted.
I know the man, you know, the man is a Rotarian like me. I have to laugh because I never know so much things about him.
I mean, you can make this stuff up. He has shot himself in the foot over and over.
And
He
still get work. Still get bigger work. Still get bigger work.
Yeah. But you cannot keep giving him a bite. You can't keep passing him along, right? And for some reason, I don't know why this would preempt the leader of the opposition from holding a public forum on the man's qualifications as where he was before and why he had to leave.
And that's the
There's only one reason. There's only one reason, Herbie. That is the monkey feel it exposed and it don't want to go further than a certain step because them have their own. They have their own situation to deal with.
I would agree. I would agree with that because
they have their own. They have their own skeleton closet.
Yeah,
when it comes to corruption.
I would agree because it is so. If you, as you observe the situation, the lack of pushback from the other side, which is supposed to give the balance to the entire situation, is so sadly lacking that you have to ask yourself what the heck is going on. So to me, the PNP can't lead because they lack leaders. That would it explains even more now why Lisa Hanna is leaving the party, because her private comments on IG or Facebook suggest somebody with a certain level of competence that is willing to, stand up and be counted and give guidance. And then when I heard she was leaving, it shocked me. But as you take it in the context of what we're seeing, that makes perfect sense. Okay? The PNP is not ready to govern. They are bereft of ideas and bereft of any kind of leadership. Because leadership creates opportunities. As much as opportunities at times might create leaders. The opportunities have been there.
Mike,
leadership is not there. Yeah, Mike.
There's another way to look at this issue, and it has to do with the people.
Yeah.
It has to do with the people. The PNP might feel one way, but this particular issue, the appointment of Dennis Chung and the corruption of the GLP government, it has to be a national issue, a national concern. It can't be just the PNP.
I totally agree.
It has to be much broader, and I think that's where the PNP is lacking.
But
how they tell these issues to the Jamaican people and the Jamaican people claim ownership of it.
You see, Mike, the way you sell it, Mike, is that you have to break it down to make it relatable.
Make people understand that when
Exactly.
400 million teeth, there's a value to building a school.
Exactly.
There's a value to putting
Running water to a neighborhood.
running water, to put toilet,
build another
and
road.
to put in pothole, covering pothole per road.
Absolutely, and that's also Mike, the leadership is lacking. They are unable to frame the issue. They really
No, them it's not that them unable or them have no English. Cause I listen to when I listen to the press conference. You know, it's not the way that you would talk if you were talking out there to ordinary people. But the point is, the furthest that they've gone is to the media, and them get some press conference statement, and that has gone, and then them call the demonstration. But the point that I tried to find, I saw one TV thing where the point that Lass is making, which is valid. When the cameraman come and say, "Why are you here?" Nobody put it in the way that it should be put, or understand it in the way that they have been told to come out, bus pick them up, carry them go race course, and a demonstration take place. So it's a step, but it is a step that is lacking. And the reason is that the PNP is halting. I think that they have too much skeleton in the closet. They have appointed the commission, that same services commission. Many of the members of it have been appointed by the PNP as well. It's not like they don't know them.
Then how come they couldn't alert the Jamaican people much earlier about this appointment?
But it's the same thing, Mikey. Other Mikey. It's the same thing that the thief not like thief with long bag. Your body are exposed the more you go out against something like this. And you have inside of your ranks man who do the same thing. And when you come into power, if you come into power, are you going to be guilty of doing the same thing? Yes.
In fact, John, I'll tell you one thing. Why there was not a bigger hue and cry when the Prime Minister raised the salaries of the members of Parliament?
That's what I just
too many hungry people in the Parliament, so the extra money can buy more food. So therefore, where is the incentive for them to govern? Where is the leadership for them to govern?
It's just lately they come up with a job description for ministers, something he said he would have done 8 years ago. He just lately is coming up with a standard for ministers. You still have ministers who hardly make trips to Parliament, and they're arguing over that right now. Now you just get a pay raise, a whopping pay raise.
And you still not
you
going
don't want to show up for work.
No, it's again leadership. And the question is, I understand if the common man can't relate to the issue at hand, then you have already lost the battle.
No, but it's going to have an uneven understanding among the people. I'll be honest. I think the point that Mike is making have some truth to it. People and leadership work together, meaning what is happening is a reflection of the state of affairs of the country, where people are at. It took 2 years. When did the IC report come out? About a year ago or
a year
ago, right? And we made the comment about going on the street. At that time, man said, boy, we can't go on the street because you don't have enough evidence.
No, I see the evidence.
No, I'm just saying.
No, I agree
Man,
with you.
right.
But you
So
think
now the people are the government call action, and the reason why they've called whatever action it is limited. The reason is that there is a growing um for, discomfort, dislike, unhappiness amongst the people that nothing is going on. I mean, the man first money disappear. I forget the term them use in the world of accounting.
misappropriations,
No, them have another word them did use.
fraud,
No,
grand larceny.
no. Them have a word. You know the language of accountant,
All you know,
but
they
it's
have
a legal word that means it could be so hard. It don't go to the limit now, like where we have to post under the our show here that everybody have a voice,
yeah,
the
the
right
first
to say. So the point is that more people. I remember when I was in Jamaica, April last year, I went to Negril and the taxi driver that take me up at the airport. That's all we talk about. Corruption and hardship amongst the grassroots. But now that sentiment must be bigger, wider, deeper, because it's in the news that they're appointing this man and them cover is a cover up.
Mr.
I
John,
don't know if I'm gonna go prison, but the worst case scenario is that him should lose power.
and he didn't.
Let me interject. All right.
Herb, while you do that, can you respond to the question them in the comments?
This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right? Because folks says that we're not on track, but we are in fact on track. One of the key things we have to recall here: what's the purpose of the IC sending the report for further validation to the FID? I put here in both the private chat and the comments is that the report spanned 200 pages and only covers the period 2018 to 2023. I don't know how many of you guys on the committee here recall when I did a presentation. I was talking about ADMAT. I was talking about people or gentlemen in the office of the Prime Minister who went to Mexico City, picked up millions of dollars, and laundered it through a former officer of the JDF MIU down in St. Lucia. And that money, the St. Lucian government said in 2021, December, by the close of the year, all monies that ADMAT have and other monies that others, whether you're in government or opposition, have, need to be moved out of St. Lucia. They're not going to launder money no longer. And that money, Mike, came to several financial organizations, right, in Jamaica. And so you have to realize that we have allowed the Prime Minister to successfully launder money from St. Lucia all the way into Jamaica, into real estate and other ventures. And Mike, what was the name of that financial?
Yeah, the one with you saying both money.
SSL?
He
The one
moved,
before Cash Plus?
no man, Mike. What was the name of the bank that or the organization, financial organization that got the funds from ADMAT?
Oh,
Oh, well, it came over to oh, good Lord. Let me look up the money came over to the Prime Minister's new company. It came from ADMAT to the one of the Prime Minister's new company.
After the St. Lucian government tell them they
Yes,
have to move their money.
because that's what money used to buy Acadia. He put the down payment on Shenstone Drive, and he bought the third property, which was hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it.
Because this is the root of the funds that the report covers 2018 to 2023.
Yes.
But FID is supposed to go back and establish the source of those
Right.
funds.
Right.
And if they do that, it means they're going to be looking at the trip to Mexico City and the trips down to
St. Lucia.
St. Lucia. And this is what they've all avoided at the IC, even though they have a report that was commissioned by a member of parliament in the PNP. So I won't not the PNP for not looking ahead. They were looking ahead when they commissioned that report. And they got the report, and it says how that laundering was being done. They just didn't have the power to introduce it into parliament and to get an investigation going back then. But it's taken a while for the IC to catch up. And now the IC has caught up. The IC realized that it needs to turn it over to either the FID or to MOCA, because in each case, it's criminal activity. It's money laundering. Right?
Well, what should have happened was that they should have made a referral to the DPP and required the DPP to publicly respond. And that didn't happen. The DPP was never asked to respond, and that's the problem.
I see Loxley here saying the St. Lucian government insisted investments must benefit the population and investors must have brick and mortar present in St.
Right.
Lucia. Right? Well, that's the very point, Loxley. If you're laundering money in the country, it's not going to benefit the population. You're not invested in an office building. You're not investing in
employment.
So you got to move the money.
That's the whole situation with. That's the nature of money laundering.
Yeah, yep. No question about it.
Yep. And Elaine, as far as why was the report suppressed? The report was suppressed because Holness went to the Supreme Court and filed action saying that the law that governs the Integrity Commission, that permits the Integrity Commission to investigate him, was unconstitutional.
No, I think he wanted to limit the scope and his allegation that the Integrity Commission is operating outside the scope of what the law gave them to do.
Right, but basically he wanted to declare that unconstitutional, so that would limit them in their activities.
Exactly. So back
the
to what
bottom line is he hasn't filed for over 4 years.
Back to what John was saying. Let me put it in context for some of our viewers. The Prime Minister brought in to his three companies a total of $472 million, paid out about $425 million. And in the case of each of the companies, he said there was no profit. So we have a $50 million spread between what the intake and the outtake and outgoing was, but there's no profit. That's hardly credible. The Prime Minister was building houses where he borrowed $60-something million to build a house. And by the time the house was built, he had paid back over $40 million. But at the same time, if there was no profit, and the prime minister doesn't make that kind of money as a salary, where did that money come from to pay back the debt? You can only pay debt back when the company makes a profit. So the prime minister wasn't paying back with profits, was the prime minister laundering money? So the Jamaican people need to understand that the monies that are being spent here could build a school, fix a road, give more scholarships to the indigent in Jamaica, the poor people who can't find money to go to school. Okay? This is how the average Jamaican is affected. And that's why how the prime minister obtains his money should be of interest to every Jamaican. It's not a privileged position to make money. When you are the prime minister, you are prevented from self-enrichment because of ethics rules. The money that the prime minister got and appear to get, I've got unethically at the minimum and perhaps illegally, could have benefited many Jamaican families to give them a help out or a step up, whichever one you want to look at it. That is how corruption harms Jamaica. Because the money doesn't go into the budget to spend for the public at large. The money goes in the prime minister's pocket and he keeps enriching himself and not helping the Jamaican people. That is why every Jamaican should be concerned. If the prime minister is now appointing somebody whose previous stewardship was deemed...
Correction, Mike. The prime minister did not appoint him. It was the PSC, the Public Service Commission.
Public Service appointed a man whose previous stewardship was dubious at best and perhaps corrupt, if not incompetent. Okay, why does the average Jamaican have to worry about it? Because in his new stewardship as head of the FID, the Financial Investigation Division, okay, then it means that his incompetence will compound future problems. Money will be taken on a personal level, will be diverted, misappropriated, fraudulently obtained, all of the above. And that money would have gone to the benefit of the Jamaican people. Okay? So my point is, as Jamaica seeks to forge ahead, and there are good projects I've heard going on in Jamaica, the government has an oversized role to play because of the kind of economy Jamaica has. So as you seek to corral the money from real property taxes and income taxes and sales taxes, okay, if we keep giving everything to the Chinese to do, i.e. build roads and these long-term repayment plans, there will not be enough of a cash flow to meet the ordinary needs of everyday Jamaicans. And if the Prime Minister and his cronies and the governing party keeps bypassing the rule of law, then they're not operating for the interest of the Jamaican people. They're operating in their interest, for the benefit of themselves. And this is the problem. Jamaican people expect and have a right to expect that the government is looking out for them. Not every Jamaican will be sophisticated to understand everything that's being done, but every Jamaican has a right to expect that the governing party will seek what's in their best interest, meaning the people's best interest.
And to expect that the opposition will oppose it and expose it.
Exactly. And that is not happening. So the Jamaican government and the opposition have failed the people miserably.
And one of the things we notice, Mike, is that you have in the country, you have some mechanisms set up to hold people accountable. You have like the Integrity Commission, you have FID, these organizations which supposed to hold these politicians accountable. what we see happening, and this is one of the main concerns, is that they're being attacked by the government and certain politicians, and where they can't attack and vilify these organizations, they try and manipulate them, right? They try to put people in place to say, well, you go through the motion and you say, okay, you go in front of it, right? Formally, because it is the place to hold you accountable. But when you go there, it's just a formality because the people there are people that you put there, right? And they give you a pass. So what they are setting up are ways and means to bypass these organizations that's supposed to be the checks and balances to ensure that corruption doesn't take place in the country.
That's true. Very
Right?
true. But the bar is very low, lass. The bar is low. So, and as these people cross the bar, what happens? There's no accountability. And that is the tragedy of it all. The accountability that's lacking is not just something that happens at a higher level that doesn't affect the average Jamaican. And I'll bring it to even another level. How many teachers has Jamaica lost to overseas entities because they aren't able to pay them a livable wage? And notwithstanding, when Jamaican students finish the O levels or the CXC, they leave Jamaica and the brain drain continues. So therefore, the poor man trying to get his child through school or his children through school, the moment they get to a point where they're eligible, they send them overseas, Canada, the US, the UK. Why? Opportunities exist for the children to grow and develop. So Jamaica has a limited opportunity to grow. Why? We have a brain drain. That brain drain takes our best and brightest away. Our finance minister just got a nice opportunity, and I'm happy for him because he's a bright man. He just got a nice opportunity in New York working for the UN.
No, so, World Bank.
World Bank, I'm sorry, for the World Bank.
The IMF.
So my point is, Jamaica feathers everybody else's nest but our own. That's why corruption in the island is something that we must stop, because the people continually paying a price. 25 years from now, if we're all around, how bad will it be?
Well, I don't know how bad it will be, but what is clear is we are entering a dangerous period. And I say that because
we might be in there already.
Yeah, I say that because a couple of weeks ago they recovered over 200 firearms in a shipment to Jamaica.
Yeah.
Over 200 firearms. Now, is either one or two things now. Either they're selling the guns or they're preparing for a war. You understand?
Could be both.
I think we are beyond selling guns. I think they're preparing for war because one way or another, they see this government as so corrupt, so selfish,
that they'll do anything to hold on to power.
They'll do anything to hold on to power, or somebody on the opposite side going to have to get them out.
Well, the problem is the opposite side is inept. Let me be honest; they are inept.
I got a question for you. And it's something I was pondering about this week. When we look at the pattern in Jamaica right now, does it in any way remind you of the pattern in Haiti?
Very much so.
I won't go as far as Haiti, Patrick, but I'll tell you this. It reminds you of the pattern from the 80s and the late 70s.
No. But specifically, I want you to look at it in
that context?
Yeah, in regards to Haiti. Do you see any similarity?
There are some similarities, yes.
Dangerous similarities.
There are some, but the trouble
No,
is,
I don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. The biggest problem with Haiti is the lack of institutions. And by that I mean police force, military, parliament, civil service, bureaucracy, or otherwise.
But those things don't provide answers. Those things don't provide
what I'm
answers.
saying, yeah, it does. Those things, the answers that those things provide is basically a liberal, quote unquote, system. A liberal system where people vote and change government every 4 years.
But hold on, John. Hold on.
It's
hold
like
on.
it's like
Hold on, John.
let me just make the point. It's like
No,
you have a pressure cooker. You have a pressure cooker.
Discussion. I don't really want to make it a long discussion, right? It's a reason why I asked a question, right? Because here it is. We have those institutions that you talk about. Yet there's the pattern.
We're not at Haiti yet.
No. I'm not. Follow me closely.
I get you, Patrick. I get what you're saying, and I kind of feel what you're talking about, because it all started in Haiti with the same kind of political process where you had politicians taking onto themselves more and more power and going behind the checks and balances that were put in place until the system itself break down.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We have the illusion of that system, and I say it's an illusion because it's not working. That's why I said, John, I agree with Patrick. We have the illusion of a system, of a government, of a free press, but I would say we have a stupid press and a crooked government and an incompetent opposition. So even though we might have those things in name, in fact, they're not working.
Exactly.
That's why Patrick's point is valid.
Well, what you're saying is that Patrick is implying that Papa Doc is
No.
I don't.
No.
We don't
No,
there
John.
yet. There's
No,
no
John.
institutions.
John, before the institutions break down, you have to have people trying to bypass the checks and balances, bypass the integrity commission,
there were no institutions to break down in Haiti.
What?
There were no institutions to break down.
There were institutions.
They never developed. That is one of the biggest differences with Haiti.
Gentlemen.
Anyway,
gentlemen, hold up, gentlemen. Just allow each person to make a contribution.
To their view.
John, finish what you're saying, John.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a bit extreme to equate Jamaica with Haiti. I'm not sure. The crime might be an element that is similar, and the gangs, but it is in a different context, in that one of the biggest differences with Haiti and Jamaica is the absence of systems, institutions that quote unquote liberal democracy set up.
That's what is being bypassed. No, that's the point. I think Patrick is trying.
Let him finish now, and then you come back. Go finish,
Well,
yeah.
no, I'm finished. I'm finished. And he's showing the connection is not so much.
What's happening now is similar to what is happening in Jamaica. That's not the point I think Patrick is trying to make.
Okay.
I think Patrick is trying to say we are on track.
To become.
If we continue to bypass these checks and balances that keep the democracy in place, and I agree with Patrick, because if the leadership continue to bypass the checks and balances, get up behind Integrity Commission, get behind FID, get behind the parliament, get behind the courts. If we're going to reach a situation where
those things have no credibility.
Exactly.
And therefore they are similar to Haiti, which never had them before. Is that what you're saying?
And I don't agree with you that they never had them before, John.
Okay.
But I can put it another way, John. I can put it another way too, right? And like I said, only because I didn't want to get in a long discussion of it. But you can use the same analogy for what's happening here, right? With the current government, right? Where they totally disregard the structure, the governmental structure, right? And they will even go as far as to blatantly disregard the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And they can do it because, of course, they've already eroded certain checks and balances, right? And make it seem like what they're doing is legitimate. That's the same thing. That's the same thing the government is doing in Jamaica. That's the same thing Lass is mentioning when he's talking about working around these checks and balances.
And
Right?
that's
It's saying that the law doesn't apply to who it does, who they think it shouldn't apply to.
And Patrick, they do that because they have appointed incompetent and amoral people to govern in the institutions that are supposed to uphold the rule of law.
Yes.
Exactly.
And therefore you have a DPP who's not even a P. Okay? Now you're going to have a FID chair who have no eye in terms of integrity.
Right.
And you have a crooked prime minister. And yet you have an opposition that seems to feature more eunuchs than people with cut backbone.
Right.
The image is there. That's why I agree with you. Image is there. And if we fail to really answer the clarion call, which is really loud right now, God help us.
Yeah. It's just like when Mike said a moment ago about, you know, we at a serious point in time. We are at this junction right now, you know, and with the importation of the arms and all of that. It's nothing new.
Nope.
We have been at this junction several times.
Absolutely.
Over and over.
But the only difference.
Right. Okay. So
The
if
difference-
we're getting,
The difference is in the 1980s, we had institution at the community level. People, easy access to the masses, mobilization and whatever. That is not taking place right now in Jamaica.
No.
You know, most of the campaign I see by the PMP is just on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that is not enough.
No, it's not.
Organizers have to be in the community, touching, people and talking people and what have you.
Constant
And it's I heard the PMP have someone who's coordinated the campaign, and this person just focus on digital media, and that's not enough.
No, it's not.
It's
a blind man, John and Mike. It's a blind man I'm using.
So again, they're utilizing AI.
Where there's
Yes.
no eye.
John,
Patrick.
John, you wanted to say something, John.
Yeah, I don't agree with the analogy of Haiti still, but I stand. If, especially now that you make the point about it's not a new thing. The guns is not a new thing. It's a validation of the fact that despite the guns, Jamaica still embody a certain system which is still different from Haiti. The reason why Haiti is different is because under Papa Doc, there were no institutions that complement a liberal system, voting, in the way that we have it. No, I'm not saying it can't disappear. I'm not saying, crime is not of a different order than when Manley came, the period of Manley. I
But
mean,
on the issue, John,
yes.
on the issue of the election, that reminds me of something you said some weeks ago, right? When you were pointing out that, if election was held today, it's a possibility that the JLP could have win.
Absolutely.
And what
Absolutely.
would happen then?
What would happen? Tell me.
More
Election
of
is
the
not the
same.
issue.
More
Election
More
is
of the
not the
same.
issue.
More of the
Election
same.
is not the issue.
Eh?
That's what that is saying. It is saying that election is not the issue.
That's true.
I'm not sure what you mean when you say that.
Let me just say,
If people don't vote, let's say election come and 30% of the people turn out. I'm just calling a number, and the JLP come back. Does that mean that elections are no longer relevant in Jamaica? No, it's going to tell you for different reasons.
I didn't say anything about relevance,
But
Hey, folks, in response to the discussion so far, I just received something from our famous senator, and he's saying that the PNP has ground game is on. There is conference in every communities every week, and they're doing tours. So what this brother man is saying to me that the PNP is on the street, the ground game is working.
okay.
So
I wish them well.
Yeah, that is for elections. That's what that is for.
I also received a text here saying that if the election was called today, the PNP would win 40 seats to the JLP 23 seats. At the end of so
go on.
this is coming from the General Secretary of the People's National Party. I just read that text, and the earlier text is from Senator Lambert Brown. Telling me that the PNP ground game is on. So
For election.
for election.
Yeah.
I'd love to, you know what I'd love to see, Mikey? I'd love to see the latest polls, the standing of both parties, because that's going to surprise some people.
Well,
I still believe the PNP is going to win, though.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the statement
just a minute.
about I'm just saying I'm assuming that the statement about the 40-23 is based on a poll.
I assume that. But I think the PNP is going to win. And I say that because I think oldness wear out its time. I think the Jamaican people.
I wouldn't be so.
Mike,
I think the Jamaican people is at the stage in where they're definitely going to vote against this man.
Mikey, I know he has worn out the sun, but I'll say this to you in closing. We have a problem in our healthcare system. Okay. We have a problem in our education system.
Problem?
a two-pronged problem. We don't have enough teachers, and we're not paying them a livable wage, and we cannot build any new schools. That was a problem 50 years ago when Michael established an alliance with Castro, and Castro started to build schools for us. That was a problem when the IMF criticized us for failure to develop the country's education system and build more schools. And here we are 50 years later, same problem. Okay? So you have healthcare, education, and a lack of financial integrity. So even though we have a very powerful tourist industry that they keep boasting about, the money not trickling down far enough to help the people. So I hope the PNP ground game is on. But that's one hell of a hole to fill if you're taking over a new government. And the last thing I'll say is that based on what I heard the JLP say in terms of what they're doing, they are taking the future revenue funding current expenses. That is a formula for disaster.
Well, from what I have here, I know that I'm texting now is that there is there there are a number of conferences scheduled from June 7 right across the island. You understand me? And today, the PMP has 8 divisional conference across Jamaica. So all is not lost. It seems that the
Well,
PMP is out in the community and organized.
we're
And
glad. I
uh,
am
uh,
certainly glad that's heartening to hear.
yes,
That
yes,
is happening.
It is happening to you. It
That
is
is
yeah.
happening.
happening, Mike. But if they don't, I would also suggest that these conferences will be a waste of space if they continue to fail to show the connection between the fraud and the loss of opportunity for Jamaicans at large.
The development, the
Yes,
corruption and how it impact the
absolutely.
development. Yeah.
You gotta show that. If you don't show that, look, we're not expecting a fraud-free or corruption-free society. But when fraud and corruption are the dominant statuses in the country, more so than an honest man working hard to make a living, there must be a change.
Well, gentlemen, I think we all agree with that. And like anything else, it's now 2 o'clock. We're gone past the 2 o'clock, so we have to
2 o'clock, six
2 hours.
o'clock.
6 o'clock. Sorry, 6 o'clock. So, bro, and let's go around the honor. Any last words?
Yeah, Mike, let me say this. Somebody brought up the Auditor General's report,
Yeah.
the FID, and you have to determine now if Dennis Chung has the depth and the knowledge to change any of this stuff, right? They had problems in areas of oversight, resource allocation, and operational efficiency. Some of the issues flagged include weak governance structures, with the report highlighting deficiencies in the internal controls and accountability mechanisms, which could hinder the FID's ability to effectively investigate financial crimes. Inadequate staffing and expertise. Now you're going to bring in the head guy who does not have the necessary expertise in law enforcement. There are concerns that the division lacks qualified personnel with the necessary law enforcement and forensic accounting experience, right? I don't know of Dennis Chung as a forensic accountant, even though he may have taken a class or two. But I don't have him testifying in any big cases that bring about prosecutions. If he was an expert, it should have happened at JFF because you had enough people with the hand was in the cookie jar at JFF. All right. The report notes that several high-profile financial investigations have been delayed or stalled. This must be music to Mr. Holness's ears, right? Because they're going to say, "Oh, we have priorities, right? And it raises questions about the division's ability to execute its mandate. They have limited funding, reportedly affected the division's ability to acquire necessary technology and resources for financial crime investigations. Now, with the advantages today in IT and cyber security, of course, the our friends from Israel are in Jamaica, the ones who produce the
Pegasus.
Pegasus, and there are several knockoffs to Pegasus that are also available today. Matter of fact, there's one, they term it zero-day exploits. It's a malware that's not recognized by any cyber specialist or antivirus programs. They do email penetration, right? And they sell it to governments for $500,000 or more. Now, we wonder, somebody said earlier that the people are afraid to protest. They're afraid to come out because they're getting shot.
Well,
I said before that the head of the JCF is what? An IT specialist. He was brought in specifically to advance IT as an investigative tool, cybersecurity, or cyber as that tool that's more effective. Well, if he's using the Israeli knockoff or any of these programs, it would explain why JCF is able to pinpoint and electronically tag 100 or more people that they could go out and effectively hunt and kill them before they had a chance to create any history.
Folks, the PNP announced another demonstration. This time, this one will take place in Old Harbor tomorrow under the theme Rescue Jamaica from Corruption. So while we're saying this, they are listening to us and responding to us in real time. So the PNP is out there.
That's good news.
The PNP is out there and they're working.
Well,
Proof
of the pudding is in the eating.
Yeah, and
I'm glad to hear that.
I'm glad.
And I hopefully one day we will finally learn to live with our doors and windows unlocked. I mean, it will be shut.
You're going into a new, that's a different society.
That's how me feel.
Folks,
all right,
2000.
Folks, let's go around the honor. Final words, John.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that the dormancy that we worried about is not actually as dormant as we originally thought. I am very pleased to hear that, but we still have a ways to go, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating, mainly the election results.
Last.
Well, I don't know what poll the PNP is relying on to say how to predict what the coming elections is gonna be, but if they have the figures to come to those conclusions, it's a joy. I personally have my own opinions on that because I believe that there's a lot of work that they need to do to recover some ground, because I believe they have lost some grounds over the last couple of months, because in my view, the GLP has been out there campaigning for a long time. right? And you know, I am not as hopeful that at this present time, as the PNP are right now, but we'll see what happens to change my mind in the next coming months.
Mike,
Gentlemen, there's an old saying. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And with that in mind, I love my people. I hold my people in the highest regard because I've never known a Jamaican anywhere who has never stepped up to the plate to hit a home run or at least a double if you're playing baseball. And so the challenges are many in our great island. Our people are great people facing many challenges. I am hopeful for a revival of the opposition, if nothing else, to give the Jamaican people hope that when the sun rises in the proverbial tomorrow, so will they. And I keep praying for the island that I love. As an old baseball manager, Cameron Lasard used to say, when you cut him, he bleed Dodger blue. When you cut me, I bleed black, green, and gold. I love my people.
Patrick,
Yes, I fully endorse, what has been said before. And I would just add that my position is, it is way past time for more action. And I'm talking about action of the kind where even with this appointment at Chung, we don't sit down and take it. We start looking for every reason to reverse that. Not just reason, every possible way we can take action to reverse it. Whether through the courts, whether through constant protests, whether through blasting the services commission, whatever it takes. But not to sit complacent. Because we already can anticipate the outcome.
folks, there's not much I can say. All of you have said it. My only hope is that the text I receive is just a sign of something much greater. That is the mobilization of the Jamaican people into an anti-corruption force. I hope the PMP and the leadership will move in that direction. Listeners, I'm begging you to like and subscribe this channel, Waterhouse Vibes, because like so many other things, what we're trying to do is to build a community here, keep you informed, and provide a critical eye on development in Jamaica. So please like, subscribe, and share this channel to your friends. Remember, we broadcast every Sunday at 4 o'clock. Those of you listening in Jamaica, that's 3 o'clock. So until next Sunday, walk good and keep your nose clean. Okay, don't get mixed up in the corruption and don't get bribed because Jamaica is the land we love. All right, brothers? One
Yeah.
love.
One love, one
One
love.
love.
Nick,
Yes,
talk
sir.
to you guys. Be good.